So today we're going to do a few little tips on getting started with our painting. The subject is just a simple apple, and I've set it up so the light is coming in one direction, and we're going to use also a limited palette. We're going to use titanium white, cadmium yellow light, cadmium red light, and ultramarine blue. So we're going to keep this quite simple. And to start a painting in oil, it's a little different from some other mediums such as watercolor. We want to remember two things. We're going to paint from dark to light, and the other thing is we're going to paint thinly and then thickly over the thin. It's also known as fat over lean. So the first thing I'm going to do is sketch out my subject, and I'm going to use a round, and I'm going to use some paint thinner. This is Gamsol, and I'm going to dip my brush into the thinner. Be careful when you do that because your bristles are going to just immediately take a lot of that, and it's going to be very, very thin if you're not careful. So sometimes I'll take a paper towel and I'll just dab it off a little bit, and then I'm going to go ahead and sketch it in. You can use whatever you want to sketch with, but I just like to use the paint. You can see how thin this is. That's really, really thin. And I'm going to use red. You can use whatever color you want. The point I like to do is make is that I want to cover this up eventually. So this drawing or sketching really won't matter. One big thing I want to do is make it just as large as possible. And you can see this is just a big thing here. And I'm not caring too much about getting this accurate at all. I'm going to look for where my horizon line is going, or in other words, it's going back there somewhere. And then I see some shadow back over here. The reason I'm using just some red paint is so that I don't get so precious with this drawing. I'm going to get started. If I was using a pencil like or charcoal or something like that, there's a real temptation to treat this preciously as if you were doing a coloring book. Really black. It's picking up color, but the darkest color I'm seeing is what's not getting any light. And to do that, my darkest color is ultramarine blue. I'm going to add just a little bit of red to it. When I add the red to the blue, I get kind of a purple, which is kind of what I'm seeing here. So I've mixed that. Then I'm going to get a big brush. And this is a filbert. I'm going to, again, dip it into the solvent very, very slightly. And you can see that right there is really, really thin. Actually, it's probably too thin. So I'm going to mix a little bit to the edge of it. And here I'm going to look for the back. And I'm just kind of scrubbing it in. I'm going to add some more blue to that because it's not quite as dark as I want. And there it is. And I'm just scrubbing this in. This is an 8x10 canvas. I'm adjusting as I go along. Then I'm going to go look for the lightest light that I see. And we squint down a lot in oil painting. It helps us just to see, simplify things into what we call values. And the lightest light is going to be what is hitting this apple shape at its point. And that's going to me, it's going to be right in here. So I'm going to take some yellow. I'm going to add a little white to it, which lightens it, and we know it also cools it down. But what happens when light really hits an object, it washes it out. And if you notice, if you remember from the last video, I lightened that up a little bit by adding it to the edge. So I'm going to add a tiny bit of red to get kind of that orange. I think that's the color I'm going to try. Again, I get a big brush. I dip it just a little bit in the solvent, and I'm going to pat it off a little bit there. And then I'm going to put that right there. And it is mixing a little bit with the red underpainting, but that's okay. And I'm actually still putting this on very thinly. So now I'm going to go back to my darks. I'm going to work with the darkest dark I see. And when I squint down on the object, the darkest dark is right down in here. So I'm going to go back with my blue. I'm going to add just a tiny bit of yellow to it, because what's happening is it is reflecting some of that color off the apple. And I'm going to go back to using a dark brush. I've got brushes on here of the same size, a dark and a light, dipping it a little bit into the Gamsol, and then I'm going to get it right over in here. And when I put it on the canvas, I'm just seeing that it does need a little bit more to it. We'll go back in and add a little more blue to that. And I think it needs to even be darker under there. It's just not getting any light under there. There we go. So right now what we're doing is we're just playing with building this painting. We're working from thin to thick, I know there's fat to lean, and we're going to be working from dark to light. This gives you an idea of how we're going to get started. As we look at it too, we're going to look for what the local color is next. And that'd be probably the easiest color to mix. And for me, this is a mixed colored apple. But the local color is a red, and it's a very warm red. So I'm going to add some yellow to it. I'm going to clean my brush up. I just wipe it off as much as I can. We'll see what that does. I'm going to add a tiny bit of Gamsol. Again, I'm going to pat it off. You can see there's still a lot of color in there. And I'm going to put that red right here where it's, to me, it's still pretty bright. Right now, as you can see, this just looks like nothing. So here we go again. I'm going to warm it up a little bit here. You notice that there's a very light highlight on this thing, but I'm not playing with that right now. Now I'm going to go mix in and get a warm color, kind of a brownish orange, which I'm seeing right down in here, where it's not getting a whole lot of light. Not looking much like an apple thing, is it? I'm going to go back up here and kind of play with that red a little bit. And we're going to continue to work on this. I'm going to mix a little bit of green up here. Red and yellow make green. So like I said, we're working with a very simple palette to get started. And when it's wet like this, you can blend right in. So I hope this lets you see how to start a painting. Remember, you want to work thin first. You want to make sure it's not so thin that the paint is running down your canvas. And then you want to work from dark to light. So this is basically how we get this painting started. And you can see the different colors I've got already from just mixing using this limited palette. So we're continuing working with this apple portrait or painting, and sometimes the simplest things can be the most challenging things. So we're going to continue on, and we're going to be building this as we go. We're still working from dark to light. I'm going to concentrate on the apple for a little bit. So I'm going to mix some green. I'm going back into my original green. I'll add a little more of the ultramarine blue. I'm adding a little more of the yellow, and I get a beautiful bright green. When I squint down, the green is over here, and it's pretty localized green. It's a pretty intense green. So I'm just putting it in. Then I'm going to go back, and didn't clean my brush because I wanted a little bit of that green in that red, and it makes a beautiful warm rusty orange, I guess that's what I would call it. Then I'm going to clean my brush, and I want to go back and go into this darker green. So I'm working from dark to light, but I'm also working right here on the apple with what we would call local color. And I am going to dip down into my Gamsol and clean the brush a little bit to get some of that paint off. So I'm going to go mix a little darker green. I'm also going onto the edge of my color as I mix it. And I'm going right back in here where it is not getting quite as much color. So you can see I'm making some pretty definitive lines as I work. We're just getting the general idea here. So I work on this apple. I'm going to go back in here. It's not getting a lot of light. I can use that same green right there. And then as it moves up out, it is receiving some light. So I'm going to just put a little bit of that yellow there. See how I like that. I do like that. Going back to some more of the red right there where it's not getting a whole lot of light. See, I've left this, it's pretty light there, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to mix some of the orange. Yellow and red make orange, right? And I'm constantly comparing one color to another as I work. I'm making pretty bright orange there because it is getting some light. Then as it moves, I can go back into that color and move down. So right now it looks like a patchwork. So this is where the oil paint gets to be a lot of fun because now we can start blending in as we go. But first I do want to work some more with the background. And down here, as I'm looking over here, it's getting some light, not as much light here, but it is picking up some light. So my palette's getting a little crowded. This is where we bring in our palette knife and just scrape off some of the paint. We can save it. So put some of that on the edge. I'll take my paper towel and clean that off too. If you were using a disposable palette, you could just take off that piece of paper and move your color back onto the newer piece of palette paper and continue to work. So let's go back into this. I'm going to squint down. I'm going to work on this shadow here first and then back over there. And the shadow's dark. It's moving. As it moves away, it gets lighter, and then it's dark here because it's not getting a whole lot of light there either. So I'm going to go back to my ultramarine blue. I'm going to add a tiny bit of yellow there because it is working with some of the reflected light. I'm going back in and getting a little more of that ultramarine blue, picking up a little bit more of that green, and then we'll pick up a little bit of the red just because it is sort of a warmish purple that's going on there. I'm going to still dip it a little tiny bit into the solvent. Yeah, I think I'm liking that. And as you can see, I'm adjusting as I go too. Still looking kind of like a mess, isn't it? I'm gonna go back into this blue. I'm gonna add a little more red to it over there because it's really warmer. There we go. This is fun. Still not exactly what I want, where I'm gonna go. Here it's bouncing color off of that. That's what's so much fun about working with something from light, is that you can really see what's going on here. So I've made a pink here. It's way too pink. Add a little bit of blue to it. So now I get a lavendery color. Let's just see what some of this looks like back over here. Kind of fun. I see too it's a little warmer color, so I add yellow. Let's try some of that right there. Liking that a little bit better. And over here it's really getting some light. So I'm gonna pick out a clean brush. I'm gonna squint down and I'm gonna get a lot of that warmth and light there. It's a little too much. Let's add a little pink to that. Add a little more yellow. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of going with the color as I see it. It's looking like a big patchwork quilt right now. Add some blue back in here. A little white to it to cool it off a little bit. Some over here too. Now it's starting to have some life to it. I think I want a little more of that blue in there. So I'm comparing as I'm going. Oh, I like that better. There it is. We're comparing, we're trying to cover the canvas as quickly as we can. As it goes away, it's going to get a little darker. So I'm adjusting it. Still looks kind of like a big mess. That's all right, we're getting there. So I'm going back into these colors here. I think I want to adjust them. That's a wonderful thing about oil paint, is that you can adjust. And I'm blending edges at this point. I'm working too, trying to get as much of the canvas covered as possible, because guess what happens? Each color reacts to what's around it. Still looking like a bit of a mess. And I'm just playing with these colors. I'm adding to this palette. I'm comparing them as I go. Just having some fun here. Just trying to get this covered as quickly as possible so that I can go back and adjust. As we get better at this, we will begin to be able to put more color out there and be more accurate with it. But at first, don't worry about that. Just worry about getting the idea down. And look at all the colors we're getting just from these three. So now I'm going to go back and work into this apple shape again. I'm going to squint down, and now is when I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of those accents because I think I need the comparison. So where it's really light there, right in here, when I squint down, it looks like a very warm pink. So I'm going to mix that very carefully to the edge of that white because it's also cooled down quite a bit. We don't want to get carried away with highlights. I'm going to go back and use this round brush. I'm going to put it on just thick, right in there. Then I'm seeing some in the apple right over here. Now I'm going to go back in and start blending a little bit, going back into my colors. I'm going to work from dark to light again. Right in here is this red as it goes in down into the apple. It gets very dark down there. I'm going to actually add a little bit of that blue to there and just see what I get there. Remember, we're just using these primaries and that's it. Let's go back and get some more of that red right up in here. You notice this is a shorter brush. Go back and get that really light again, because what we're doing at this point is we are adjusting as we go. More yellow. And when we're mixing, we're just kind of asking ourselves, what is going on here? Do I need some more yellow, or do I need some more red, or what do I need? Cleaning my brush. I'm going to mix some of this lighter green here. Let's do some blending. And squint down a little bit. Same thing about right here where it's coming together a little bit more. I'm going to go back in here and blend some of these edges. To get the shapes too, we have to realize that it's getting darker in places where you can't see as much as what's going on, and I can paint right on top of that now. I'm using a very light hand with my brush to be able to get that color in. And you know, these apples are not always perfectly rounded, are they? This guy isn't. So it's starting to take shape. I'm going to go back now and work it with some of my darker colors and some of the shadows, and let's see if we can get a better handle on that. So I'm adding the ultramarine blue, I'm adding a little bit of that red to it. I'm just trying to get right in there. And that's a little too red, so I'll add a little more blue to it. That's really where it's dark right there. As you can see, this is totally different from what that sketch looked like when we first got started in it. Now back in here, it's getting a little bit of a green in there, just because of the way the shadow is going. So I'm just kind of playing with it, playing with the edges. I'm going to go back and put a little more blue in it. And I want those edges to, as edges go behind other objects and move away, they get softer. And I can still keep adjusting. I'm going to adjust this edge here too. I'm painting on top of it, which softens it. So as you can see, it's now starting to take shape.